Hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm Alex.
I'm Joey.
So, speaking about guns and the upbringing, what this has to do with us. As a child, my parents weren't big into guns. We didn't own any guns. They didn't like the idea of them killing animals, killing people. So I didn't really actually get into guns until later on. But as a high schooler, all of my friends talked about joining the military and being cool with our guns, of course. So just being as a male in the 2000s, being raised through then, it's something that I went through anyway and was interested in after some time. So I ended up getting some of my own at some point.
Yeah, so I was also brought up in a similar household that didn't have a lot of guns, didn't really like them. I personally just held a interest in them, and when I was maybe about 10 or 11, had the opportunity to work in a gun store in my hometown, really just cleaning them, but allowed me to be around them more often, still learn about them. And the store owner actually took me out shooting a few times, which further introduced my familiarity with them and really interest in them. And when I was 18, I actually was able to purchase my very own first firearm, and ever since then have just held a great interest in them.
So we're speaking about SB 25-003. This bill went through the Colorado Senate April 10th. They passed it. It's going to go into effect August of 2026. And the bill says that they're prohibiting the sale of semi-automatic firearms, specifically with detachable magazines, over 22 caliber. So you won't be able to purchase them anymore. You won't be able to sell them anymore. The only way you can really get them is by meeting certain criteria or if they're passed on as an heirloom. What this means is that they're going to just restrict all guns that will be able to be purchased by regular citizens as well. And the point is really to bring crime rates down, reduce the amount of criminals that are able to get their hands on the guns easier. Doesn't mean anything for previous gun owners. Nobody's going to have to relinquish their guns or anything. It's just going to prohibit the sales and purchases. You can still keep your guns. Um, just no more transferring, no more gifting, no more selling, no more purchasing, that kind of stuff. So besides being a previous owner of one of these firearms, there are criteria that must be met. You first have to go through the sheriff's office. We'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about the Tyler County Sheriff's Office video. The criteria are to complete a hunter education course certified by the Division of Parks and Wildlife within 5 years of purchasing the firearm, to complete an extended firearm safety evaluation course within 5 years of purchasing the firearm. So those must be done within that 5 year section. Or you can complete an extended firearm safety course more than 5 years before, which will let you buy guns, of course, for 5 years, and complete a basic safety course within 5 years before purchasing. So you'll have to do both safety courses within that 5 year span. So, of course, these criteria won't necessarily be easy to meet. You'll have to go through some gun safety courses as well, which I would assume the extended gun safety courses are not going to be just a walk in the park necessarily. They're probably going to take some time to do. There's also a financial portion of it. You'll have to pay for the courses yourself. It's not paid for by the sheriff's office. It's not paid for by the Division of Parks and Wildlife. It's not paid for by the state. So this comes with a financial burden on the gun owners, the gun purchasers, as well as the state and the sheriffs, which they'll also speak about that in the video. The other portion of the bill really talks about rapid fire devices, or like switches, is what they're called. They're pretty much just devices that you can slap onto a semi-automatic firearm to either make it fire fully automatic or make it fire faster. Switches have been illegal for some amount of time, so I'm not sure exactly where they fit into the bill. I would guess they're just trying to cement the legality of them and just pretty much tell everybody like doesn't matter if you own a semi-automatic firearm or not, you still can't have them, and it'll, I guess, prohibit anybody from using any new kind of switch for weapons that aren't included in the bill, which is something I just don't understand. Now, moving into the articles and information that we found during the research of this bill, We'll jump straight into the first article, which is about the senator um, that was voting and the political, or all of the politics that were really involved in his portion of the court proceedings. So this is the article posted by the NSSF, the Firearm Industry Trade Association, about Senator Ken DeGraff, Representative Ken DeGraff, rather. Um, really just talks about they asked him to cover a pro Second Amendment sticker on his laptop during the debate of the bill, which I think is kind of wrong here because they're also not just tramping on, some people would debate that they're tramping on the Second Amendment right as well. This one just goes against the First Amendment right, which I think is wrong. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all that. I think it's his place to be able to put a sticker like that on his laptop, especially during something like this. But they said otherwise. This is some of his quotes right here about what he said on it. He spoke to Fox News and a couple of other news places as well. Um, so what really stands out to you about this, Joey?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely the fact that they had asked him to cover that sticker. Reading more into the bill itself, it's more understanding that this is not necessarily trying to go directly against the Second Amendment, as it is just making the process of purchasing semi-automatic firearms more difficult. But I do agree that it does go against the First Amendment of free speech, that he should have been allowed to have that open in public, even while they were discussing this bill. What I find it particularly interesting about this from this article is that the House Speaker, who was presiding over the debate, had interrupted Representative DeGraff as he was trying to explain his sticker on his laptop, that there is quote unquote, there's just a rule that we don't have that type of thing in the well, which to me doesn't make a ton of sense because within that itself, there's not a lot of context. And frankly, to me, not a lot of reason as to why he needed to cover it up.
Yeah, and I think it's well said when he answers back where here says, "Okay, no displays of the Constitution in the well, got it." Which I mean, that's obviously clearly he understands what's going on at the same time, and he calls them out for it as well. So
Yeah.
um, I think also, yeah, as well in here, the NSSF states how opposed they are to the bill as well. They also speak, I believe, in here about um, how the sheriffs are not on board, and I think they also speak somewhere about the rush, yes, the rush to pass, how there's unanswered questions, and how the bill was actually modified just days before they went into voting for it, which to me, I mean, nobody likes to do things last minute or shouldn't do things last minute, really. Being in school, even, this is where we get into that don't do your final on the last night. And so they say that to say that this bill was modified just before they voted to pass it seems like some last minute rushing to try to fix the bill, quote unquote. And I don't think that it was very well done. So it's kind of amazing to me that it passed through with this because if I see this, even if I'm supportive of the bill, I'm going to think twice about should I pass it. They just changed it. Obviously, they don't stand behind it themselves. So of course, that article doesn't have everything to do just with the bill itself. It's got a little bit more in there as well, just with the First Amendment portion of it and how they're not allowing him to practice his freedom of speech. It is still good. I think it's still good material on the bill. They do still speak about how the NSSF is not supportive of the bill, and how they also incorporate in their text how the sheriffs are not supportive. Um, and I think that it's a decent piece of information, not necessarily just to learn specifically about the bill. It's got good information in there about the bill as well. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I think it's well, I think my biggest takeaway from that is again that the bill is not trying to oppose or go against our Second Amendment, which I feel like has been a major talking point, if you will, with this bill, that they're not trying to go against our Second Amendment. But it is interesting to me that they claim that this isn't going against our Second Amendment right, but they are asking him to cover the sticker, which just openly displays that.
Yeah. Now we'll segue straight into the video as well from the Teller County Sheriff's Office. It's Sheriff Mike Sell, Sheriff Allen, and Commander Bonalik talking about the bill, what they have to say about it, their opinions, what they're going to do about it, and some key points.
And it's titled it's the bill for an act concerning prohibitive activity involving semi-automatic firearms in connection therewith prohibiting the manufacture, distribution, transfer, sale, and purchasing of specific semi-automatic firearms, and classifying a device that increases the rate of fire of a semi-automatic firearm as a dangerous weapon. All that being said, what it basically says is that they're going to stop you from having any type of, or transferring, or new purchases of any type of semi-automatic firearms throughout the state of Colorado.
So skipping forward to the next point here, it's just Sheriff Mike Sell talking about the transfer via heirloom and sales.
Here's the issue with that. That means heirlooms. That means things that have been passed down through generations that maybe at some point you've decided you want to sell to someone else, or those investments that you've made for all these years, instead of buying gold and silver and putting it in the stock market, you put it in firearms because you thought that that was a better investment. Those now go away. It's illegal for you to sell it anywhere within the state, which also means it'll flood the market outside the state. And it's going to be harder then to purchase any of these items or get any of these items. And actually, I don't know that you can. So
I think it's important there when Sheriff Mike Sell talks about the flooding of the market outside of the state. This means that not only are we going to have a harder time getting these weapons inside of Colorado, but they'll start to be sold in other states at a higher rate and then just brought back to Colorado. This I see could be a workaround to getting around the entire bill, or it could just be an issue where now it's not just a Colorado problem, but this is now starting to be a problem for all of the states around us. A little bit farther in here, Commander Bonalix talks about the guns that are excluded from the bill and more about what that means for the bill.
What bothers me is they do put a list here of 35 weapons in the bill that are actually in fact excluded from the bill. Most of which are semi-automatic weapons that use a detachable magazine and that are gas-operated systems, which goes against the whole purpose of the bill on banning these particular firearms unless the state has found you eligible to make that purchase. This really
And the last really key point here that I want to talk about is Sheriff Mike Sell talking about how they won't endorse the bill and they'll try to get guns for citizens anyway.
we in no way endorse this bill whatsoever. I don't know that. I know the Sheriff's Association has taken a stance on this bill to say no. I know that the commissioners in the state have said no. You know, this is another. This identifies even more of the runaway train that our legislative body has become. If they really wanted to do something like this and do it right, it should go to the voters. It should not be sitting in a legislative office.
So just diving a little bit deeper into that clip from the Teller County Sheriff's Office, really just talking about how Sheriff Mike Sell doesn't endorse the bill. He's not a fan of it at all. He makes it very clear during that video. And that he believes that it's going to create issues outside of just Colorado, of course. Talking about the market flood, which means that other states will be selling guns more frequently to Coloradans, and also that people will probably just be trying to bring those guns in, whether legal or illegally, either way. And then, of course, that the sheriffs won't endorse the bill, and they'll try to pass off as many passes to citizens as they can, just so citizens can still get their guns. He says, of course, specifically law-abiding citizens, so I don't know how they're going to make that work out. But also, Commander Bonalik speaking about the 35 guns that are excluded from the bill, which really is kind of just like if there's going to be guns that are excluded from the bill, he doesn't really see the point to why those guns are excluded, or even at that point, what the point of the bill is. Another thing I wanted to speak about was the Sheriff Mike Sells talks about the amendments that they made to the bill last minute. And this is something that, even as myself, I'm going to look at a bill like that and say, oh, they're making amendments overnight as they were just 2 days before the bill is really voted on. And it's much harder to endorse that, to say, I would want to vote for that as myself if I were a representative. So it really just goes to speak to kind of how shoddy the bill is, and how it seems to have been rushed, and this almost seems like a desperation act. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, there's a couple points from that video that stand out to me. One of which I do agree is the flooding of the market outside of the state of Colorado. Um, I think ultimately, with making this bill, rather making it more difficult to obtain a semi-automatic firearm, that people from the state of Colorado could very well venture to surrounding states to purchase them with greater ease and just bring them back to the state of Colorado, which I think kind of defeats the purpose in and of itself. Um, One of the other points that stood out to me is, well, within the bill itself, is that it's really up to a sheriff's discretion to determine whether a individual has met the criteria to obtain a firearm. And I say that because I think could be rather subjective based upon the sheriff. Obviously, the sheriffs in this video don't support the bill, and so if they are more or less going to be forced into following these guidelines, it makes one wonder if they're just going to hand out these passes to citizens just left and right because they don't support it. Um,
And there's more to that, of course, with the meeting of the criteria, which I can almost understand would make it more difficult for someone to receive the bill or receive the guns, as you have to go through the gun safety courses and all of that. You have to get the approval from the sheriff as well. There's going to be application cards that you have to fill out. You're going to have to submit fingerprints and all of the records to the sheriffs as well. I could kind of see that as being deterring to criminals to try to get guns, but especially in an area like the kind of the Midwest that we're in, it wouldn't be too difficult to drive, to 4 hours, 8 hours to the nearest state and just purchase a gun. We don't have any boundaries. We don't have any checks or security anywhere. Our borders are completely open. So unless you get unlucky and pulled over by some police enforcement on the way back through town, you could buy a firearm in a different state, come right back, and no one would even know. You just have it here. And, it's a 4 hour trip extra to buy a firearm, but you're saving yourself months of going through safety classes. You're saving yourself of having to go through the sheriff's office and all of that. So,
yeah, and I think that's a good point. One other add-on to that is that I think also for those that would really like to obtain a semi-automatic firearm, but don't want to jump through all of those hoops, if you will. Um, Granted, I think this scenario could be a bit more unlikely, but something I think should be taken into consideration is that they could have a friend, a family member, whomever that is willing to go through all those hoops for them, and they themselves purchase the firearm and then in turn around and give it to their friend or family member who received none of the credentials that this bill is stating that you need.
yeah, it seems like there's plenty of workarounds for it. And so the last segment that we'll talk about here is the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Roybal actually does a statement on it as well. They posted on their website. It's signed at the bottom with his badge number and everything. So this is the statement made by Sheriff Roybal, Sheriff Joe Roybal. It's pretty short, so we're going to take it pretty quick here. It was just posted the day after they signed the bill into the Senate, so he's already got everything going on here. He knows everything that's happening. I think it's important that he says in here that the bill will not stop criminals, but it'll make it more difficult for law-abiding citizens to get semi-automatic weapons. Additionally, he speaks about how, similarly to the Teller County Sheriff's Office, He'll try to ease the process for those who do have the right to buy bills, these law-abiding citizens. Seems to be the common theme here. Feels like with this bill, a lot of sheriffs just don't want it to go through. I can understand it's a lot of extra work for them, and a lot of them don't think it's really going to do anything.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's kind of the general um, consensus of this article. Ultimately stating that for those citizens that are law abiding that like to have semi-automatic firearms for personal safety, home defense, what have you, that this now rather is going to impede on that. Um, it talks in here that this bill has the potential to not only go against our Second Amendment right, but also kind of outline, what the future of the Second Amendment looks like going forward. But I again understand to a degree where this bill is going. I don't think it directly impacts the Second Amendment, but I do think it is trying to make it more difficult for um, criminals ultimately to obtain firearms. Um, but yeah, I agree that, what Sheriff Roybal says in here, that it's not going to necessarily curb gun violence. It's really, if anything, going to have more likely the opposite effect. It's going to make it more difficult for those law-abiding citizens to obtain semi-automatic firearms that understand their operation and how to operate them safely. And ultimately, those criminals that are still looking to get some semi-automatic firearms and don't want to go through all of these hoops will ultimately obtain them through other illegal channels.
So overall, I think that all three of these articles, or these two articles in this video, are good information about the bill themselves. Of course, we did pull directly from the bill. It's nice to have that solid that solid work to really just go off of. So it's really nice to be able to just pull straight out of that and then have an argument for it. In any case, I, in my personal opinion, don't believe in this. I think that this bill is not well written. I don't think that it's well done. I think that it was rushed and seems desperate. Um, I don't I don't think it should have been passed. And had I had the chance to vote on it, of course I would have not. I would have voted against it. I think that besides just going after keeping guns out of criminals' hands. We're also taking guns from citizens, of course, and that there's better ways to monitor this than to just say no one can have them, because that's obviously not stopped anyone before. Murder has not ever been legal, and people still do it. So to say that now it's illegal to purchase these firearms, people are still going to find a workaround, just like people will find a workaround to burglar, battery, assault, murder, all of the above. Laws are put into place, people still break them. I think another key point that was not really talked about by anybody is, besides just trumping on our rights, we'll put that into quotations. I think that this is not a smart move for a lot of the people that aren't talked about, the people that live in the mountains, the people that live on the plains. I would not want to be living in the northeast side of Colorado, and anywhere off the mountains, and open my door to a bear one day, and then suddenly I have to load my very slow semi-automatic, or not semi-automatic, weapon. And I don't think, in a lot of cases, one shot won't take down a bear, and the bear's not going to wait for you to reload. So, just one example of how this bill can be a detriment, and how a lot of people may suffer from this in a lot of ways. That, you can't, as a ranch hand, as a farm hand, you can't very well go out and hunt rodents where cows and horses can break their legs in rodent holes. You can't hunt rodents effectively with a gun that takes quite some time to continuously load. So I think that there's a lot that was overseen by this bill, and I don't agree with it. I can understand the argument for it. That doesn't mean I support it.
I do think as well that the articles that we looked at have a lot of solid points. And at the same time, I do think that the bill in and of itself, I understand the idea behind it. Gun violence has been, and in my humble opinion, will forever will be an issue. And I think, frankly, there is not a lot of mitigation to that. Specifically, this bill, I do think that it is, frankly, more so a hurdle for law-abiding citizens to try to have to overcome, as opposed to directly addressing gun violence. Um, I think it's going to have a major impact on those that, again, as stated previously, know how to safely operate a firearm, what it's used for, and not want to go out and commit any acts of violence with it. So my kind of final thoughts on this is I get the idea behind it, but I don't think that in the long run, once this bill does fully go into effect, that there is really going to be much of a difference noticed prior to it having gone into effect, as we've kind of stated throughout this, that there are going to be workarounds by those that want to obtain firearms. At the very least, I can respect it to a degree as being a next step going forward.
Definitely, definitely a form of control to try to go against gun violence or any kind of issue involving guns. But I don't think it's the right step.
Yeah.
Personally.
And frankly, it's my humble opinion that I don't know that there ever will be a right step, because as you mentioned earlier, with a variety of things, there's a workaround. And firearms are just one of those things that we as human beings, I'll say, have a variety of ways of accessing. So I can understand where this is coming from, but again, I don't think that in the long run it's going to have a major impact on the gun violence that we've been seeing.
That's all I've got on it. So thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. This one's kind of long-winded, but it was a lot of fun, I think, and something we can really speak to naturally, the two of us. So see you next time.